This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Good afternoon, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes here from beautiful Salt Lake City. I'm hoping that you've had a good week. And no doubt, all of you listening have heard about the big announcement that we have been waiting months for. In February at UFO Congress, Tom DeLonge, the rocker and UFO researcher, was awarded Researcher of the of the Year Award by Open Minds. And I was sitting at a table of really respected researchers, and I can tell you that people were taken aback by the award. None of us really understand what Tom DeLonge has been doing, because he has been moving in circles that are, well, let's just say they're a little bit more elite than what we are used to dealing with in the UFO community. There is no doubt that the announcement of To the Stars and this new organization is profound. The repercussions will be felt for a long time, and it has been interesting for me to watch the comments the past couple days on Facebook. A lot of people just focusing on the money-making aspect, and they're not looking at the bigger picture, and this is serious. I implore all of you to step back, to look at the bigger picture, to look at the players, to look at the information that is being disseminated. What are the motives, and what can we glean from this? This is probably one of the most serious things and complex things that we are going to have to deal with in our community, and we need to take this seriously. So my guest this evening is Grant Cameron, and the timing of this interview couldn't be better, because he understands more than anyone the complexities in this world of people with high-ranking military credentials, people in the Department of Defense, NASA. He has worked in this for a long, long time, and I respect his work a great deal. Grant Cameron has just written a new book, which he will talk about, detailing all of this and showing you the themes that have been recurring in this field with the same players for many, many years. Grant Cameron became involved in ufology as the war ended in May 1975 with his own personal sightings. I could read his bio, which is incredibly impressive, and I don't want to, because you will go, I will post the links. You can find it on his website, and I will be posting the links telling you more about that. Grant Cameron is amazing, and there's nobody that can give you this information more than Grant. And Grant, excuse the introduction, but I just want to get to this, because this is the week. The events are so mind blowing, and people are not getting the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, you're right, Eric. I'm honored to be on your show and to be on at this time, because this is a big story. It's part of a bigger story. If you listen to someone like Chris Bledsoe, who was actually in the Tom DeLonge camp for a while, he will tell you this is just the beginning. There's all sorts of stuff about to come down the road. According to Chris, and one of the people I say that if you had Chris on, or if you know who Chris Bledsoe is, I say, this is like a hall of mirrors. That when you get into, like a lot of people are complaining about, this is getting too complex. It's getting, it just doesn't make any sense. And I always reply on Facebook. I say, welcome to U.S. intelligence. this is how it works. They are not going to give you a straight answer. So it's all this kind of stuff. So you have to find a source. And the source I've been using for about a year is Chris Bledsoe. So I say, if Chris Bledsoe tells you something has happened, this is what's going on, believe Chris Bledsoe. He knows what's going on. He is what I call an antenna, a very high level sender receiver. And that is why the U.S. government, the CIA, the President of the United States, NASA, all these different people are very interested in him because he is quite evident that he can send and receive. So I've been relying on him for a while. And I did write the book called Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan, because when I first heard about Tom DeLonge, and this would be going back, I'm not sure how long, a year and a bit back, when I heard what was going on and that Chris was involved and that he was maybe one of these 6 teams, I said, I've seen this before,
Right.
because he had the 10 witnesses, and I was saying, in fact, I've seen this like many times before, because I always tell people I've been in this since before Jesus was a carpenter, and I've seen this over and over again. I was in with Bill Moore. Like someone asked on Facebook the other day, they said, "Well, let's find out about Bill Moore and Bob Emenegger, and let's see how this thing's going to end." And I said, "Well, Bob Emenegger was a good friend of mine. I was one of the people that really made him sort of famous. He was a TV guy in the 1970s who was working as a vice president of gray advertising in Los Angeles, who was contacted by the U.S. military and asked to do 8 documentaries on the U.S. military. And then, oh, by the way, we'd also like you to do this UFO documentary, and we'd like you to hide it under the others." And he was able to walk wherever he wanted. And the other one they mentioned was Bill Moore. And I knew Bill Moore very well. Bill Moore had 24 sources. Tom DeLonge, when he was first coming out, said he had 10 sources. Well, Bill had 24 sources, and I had one interaction with a couple of his sources, but the one was Kit Green, the former CIA guy that ran the Weird Desk, was involved back in the 1980s. He was brought in to do an interview of one of my people. So I knew this was going on. I knew that U.S. intelligence was interacting with people. And so when I saw the Tom DeLonge thing, I decided I was going to put this out. I would just and that's what Managing Magic is. It starts in 1944, and it goes from 1944, and it says, okay, 1944, they took Cordell Hull's cousin to the sub-basement of the Capitol and showed him bodies and showed him craft. And that when Kenneth Arnold came out, they gave him a bunch of photographs from the 4th Air Force that were like gun camera, huge 8x11 photographs, clear flying saucer pictures, and said, these are for real. So they've been doing this leaking stuff right from the word go. And I came to the conclusion that there's 3 things. They're either disclosing, which they're not doing, because if they wanted to disclose, they would get the president and they would get CNN, Fox News, Washington Post, New York Times, and they would take them and show them the bodies and the crafts, and they'd say, whatever documents you want, here's the president, we'll answer whatever questions. That's what they would do if they wanted to disclose it. That's not what they're doing. They are not disclosing. But they are not covering up, because if they were to cover up, they would do what every single country in the world except the United States has done. And that is just shut your mouth and quit talking about it. The United States of America, people don't realize it's the only country in the world where this kind of garbage goes on, where you've got military guys leaking and stuff. And that was the Bob Emenegger story. Like 1969, the U.S. Air Force shuts down Blue Book. So that was their big project, the Project Blue Book for the U.S. Air Force. They shut it down. And in 1969, they never, ever had to talk about the UFO subject ever again. Canadians shut down in 1967. And because I'm a Canadian and I do the U.S. presidents, lots of times I'm in the States, and people will say, well, what's Canada doing? And I go, I have no idea. I have no idea whether the Canadians are even doing anything, because nobody talks about it. So in 1969, the Americans shut it down. And then what do? In 1972, they contact Bob Emenegger and say, oh, what would you say if we told you that there was a landing at Holloman Air Force Base with aliens, and they landed and we had 4 cameras filming or 5 cameras filming this thing from the air and from the ground, and we'll give you this thing and we'd like you to do this documentary. If you were to cover up, why would you then suddenly have the embers about to go out and then pour gas on the fire? They want this thing out. So they're not disclosing and they're not covering up. They're doing something in between. They're doing this gradual acclimatization thing, which I think comes from the reports that were done in the 1960s. And according to Bigelow, there was a number of these studies done. But the famous one that people know about is the Brookings Institute report, where it said you can't drop this on the people. You got to acclimatize the people to the fact that this is for real. And that's what they've been doing. It's like the ultimate story that nobody wants to handle. And so what do? You have to somehow get the people ready for this thing. So what I believe they're doing is they're leaking the story, but protecting the classified material. And they've used all sorts of people. Bill Moore. I was even getting a phone call last year or early this year. I got a phone call from a guy working in Hollywood. He's not the producer, but he's was in charge of a project. And he said, U.S. intelligence asked me to contact you. And I said, come on, I'm not even in America. Like, why would U.S. intelligence say to contact me? And they say, well, you know about the Avery. And I say, well, yeah, I know about the Avery. And then it was like, basically, well, you can be executive producer. And Ron Pandolfi from the CIA has asked me to produce a 6-part documentary. And we're going to be talking about the Avery for 4 episodes. And then they're going to do the Portal, if you've heard the whole Portal story. And you should, because part of the leaked story is in Salt Lake City. Part of the story is that Joe Firmage has a portal.
Yes.
And that this is going to be in this documentary. And they're going to drag, because I said, well, when he told me that, I said, well, okay, if it's nonfiction, who's going on camera about the portal? And then he said, well, Ron Pandolfi's wife is. And then I heard it was going to be this guy that contacted me, this sort of a writer, producer type guy. And now it sounds like they're going to drag Joe Firmage into this thing, that they want someone to go on camera to say that this portal technology exists. And so this is what they're doing. They've been doing it all along. And so when Tom DeLonge comes forward, I say, people have to know. They have to know this is not unique. Everybody thinks, this is unique. Tom DeLonge is going to break the cover up and stuff. And it's like, no, it's not that he's a bad guy. He's being managed. This is how they put the story out. This is how they release technology. This is how they put the story out, is they take people who have very high ego. Let's listen to Stephen Greer, look at Bill Moore. All these people, Dan Smith, all these people have very high egos. They believe they're the Messiah. And so the way I set up in the book is I have the 5 Messiahs. And these are people like Stephen Greer and Dan Smith and Bill Moore and Tom DeLonge that all think that they're the Messiah. They have been chosen to bring disclosure to the world. And they are being managed by what I call the 14 magicians. And the 14 magicians are the people inside, mostly in the CIA, and I name them all, who basically know what's going on, and it's their job to get this story into the public. So the magicians take because this is magic. If you understand the actual UFO story and what's behind the UFO story, it is much more complex than UFOs. It is known in the CIA world as phenomenology. And if you look on John Alexander's UFO page, he calls it phenomenology too. And if you listen to Chase Brandon, who came forward and talked about Roswell being real, the CIA guy, he used the word phenomenology. It's phenomenology. It's magic. It's all the stuff. It's remote viewing. It's psychic phenomena. It's ghosts. It's all that stuff. It's consciousness. It's this sort of overlap. And we parse it and break it into these little sections and say, channelers are not right, and contactees are not right, and experiencers aren't. It's all the same thing. Everybody's tapping into the same thing. And the CIA knows that. So that's basically what I put in this book was the magicians who understand, or who are trying to manage this magic story of what's going on here. They feed it to the 5 magicians who take it to the world. But the people always have these bad backgrounds, like Tom DeLonge, writes songs about having sex with your dog and has all these real horrible background things about him, the same as these other people. Everybody has a sort of a flaw, like Bob Lazar, who was given the story at the Area 51. They took him on there. He had the bad background, and they knew it. He didn't have the master's degrees. So what you do is you hand the story to people who nobody is really going to believe, that when the story breaks, they're going to go, it's just Tom DeLonge. He's this crazy rock star guy. He's done all sorts of stupid stuff. He's made a bunch of stupid tapes and songs and stuff. Don't believe him. And the story gets out. The same as, if you remember, the Area 51 story was actually leaked, not to Bob Lazar. It was being leaked to John Lear. And John Lear, back in the 1980s, was a very famous guy. He had this CIA background. He's a CIA pilot. He had run for Senate in Nevada. But he was kind of a weird guy. He was very honest. He would tell you the truth about everything that he had. But he believed that when you died, if you went to the light, the Greys were going to take your soul and take it to the moon, and that there was these underground fights with aliens and stuff like that. And that's who you leaked the story to, because everybody will say the Area 51 story Come on, it's just John Lear. Don't believe the story. Forget about it. And what they didn't expect was that that George Knapp in 1989 would not have a guest one night. And he would phone up John Lear and he said, I've got a guest. I need a guest for today. You know, you talked about that guy at Area 51 that said he was working on the flying saucers. Bring him on. Let's put him on the show. I haven't got a guest. And then they backlight him. And the story is not being carried by crazy John Lear. Now the story is being carried by 20-plus Emmy award-winning investigative journalist George Knapp, and suddenly the story goes viral and it gets out of control. So this is what they're basically doing. They're leaking the story. And then the other reason I wrote Managing Magic, and then I'll let you ask questions, is that Tom DeLonge, and I knew this right from the word go, he has always, his life, believed in evil aliens. He believed that the Greys are evil, the reptilians are evil. He believes the story that the reptilians are here to eat, blonde, blue-eyed young girls and this kind of stuff, and that we should maybe even use nuclear weapons to take these aliens out, launch them into high atmosphere and bring down these evil aliens. So he has this belief, which he had before. He did not get this from the government. And the proof of that is that both he and Stephen Greer claims to have 540 plus witnesses. So they're both claiming that they've got these inside sources. And yet Tom DeLonge says the aliens are evil. And if you listen to Stephen Greer, he'll say there are no evil aliens. They're both talking to the same people. So I would say that the government doesn't really give a position. They don't really tell people whether it's evil, whether it's good or whatever. They're just managing these people. And then these people come up with the idea. So that's basically where I was at. That's why I wrote Managing Magic. I said there was no way that he was going to release this evil alien scenario into the public because he's a very powerful guy. When he tweets, he gets thousands of retweets, very powerful guy. And I said if he gets this in a vacuum, that he can put this story out, that we're going to go out and kill aliens, and there's nobody opposing this, most people will just go along with it because they don't know any better.
Right.
They don't know there's an opposing story. And even though a lot of people will not read my version of the story, I said there will be an opposing version to his story when it does come out. And when he did bring this thing out yesterday, it was basically what I said he was going to do. A lot of it's tied into money. He does, in fact, own a big media outlet. He sells T-shirts. He sells books. He's going to disclose the UFO cover-up, but you got to buy all 6 books in order to get it. He's into making money. He's got a big company, so that's part of the thing is the money thing. And what he's done is he has sort of schmoozed with the military and said, made his inroads into the military and said, you're good guys, and he's got them to play along because that's the way they'd like the story brought out. Instead of it's like these evil guys covered this thing up, they lied to us, they killed people or whatever the scenario is. Now it's these guys were saving the world. And so they bought into this thing. And in fact, they contacted him. No matter what anybody wants to tell you, Tom DeLonge will say he set it up. Absolutely not. He was invited to a Lockheed Skunk Works barbecue to introduce the president. It was a barbecue was held in the parking lot of this place where all the families would come. They don't know what their husbands and wives do, but they had this barbecue, and he was asked to introduce the president. And he said, if I introduce the president, I want 5 minutes private with him. They knew he was into UFOs. This is all a setup. That's what they do. They throw the bait, and the way they get the bait is they say, Erica, you're the only person that knows what you're talking about. And then everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's true. That's what Bill Moore said. That's what Tom DeLonge said. When they agreed with the evil alien thing, he said, oh, the reason that they suddenly started talking to him is because he hit the evil alien thing, and they realized it was true, and they started setting him up with witnesses. That's what they do. They throw the hook. They know you're egotistical, that you think that you know everything, and that's how they manage you, and they move you to move and get this story out.
So and that is so much to take in, and it's mind-blowing to me, but with the evil alien agenda, and as I was watching the presentation a couple days ago and different people were speaking, they kept, certain people would throw out words that this is, alarming, or we need to look into this. And so the sentiment from each of these speakers was that of the fact that this is something that we need to look at and be concerned about. For me, as somebody who has had a lifetime full of experiences and none of them negative, that was alarming. And I also feel like we need to, where are the checks and balances here? If they're trying to harness technology, what will they do with that? Is that, and so there's so many questions, and then the moral and ethical implications of all of this it's mind blowing. And so, wow, why?
If you watch the broadcast, I watched it again a little bit this morning. If you watch the broadcast, you picked up on that. Most people won't pick up on that. For example, the guy that came from Lockheed. And this is like, you can see it's a setup. I mean, the day after he retires from Lockheed Skunk Works, he's got this top secret security. He's working in the company that's always been rumored to back engine and flying saucers. The day after he retires from his Lockheed job, he joins Tom DeLonge. And then they're reading from teleprompters. They're absolutely reading, and they've got his speech all done. And if you see the tweet, I think it was this morning, Tom DeLonge put out a tweet this morning that said that every word in that production has been planned for months. So this guy retires from Lockheed Skunk Works, and they've got a speech written for him already. So this is all planned. They were waiting for this guy to retire. This is why they did it yesterday. That's why there was all these delays. They're waiting to get all the players in position. And same as the defense guy. He retires a couple of weeks ago, and then he joins the team. So they put these people in, and it looks like these high-level guys are whistleblowers. You're not a whistleblower if you work day before for Lockheed Skunk Works. This is a setup. But you see and this guy from Lockheed Skunk Works, he was in charge of advanced aerial threats. So you get this thing, and people hear that. Or how many times did you see in the broadcast they used the word national security?
Yes.
Or the guy and I just got this a couple hours ago. This guy Chris Mellon, who had been written up before by Leslie Kean. He had sort of contacted Leslie Kean, written up as this guy who had sort of come over to the UFO side. We just gotten word that Ron Pandolfi has said he's been in this since the 1980s. And everybody thinks he just joined the ship. And this is what he said. I'll quote. He said, "Now imagine for a moment that Sputnik had remained a secret, unknown only to the Soviet Union and perhaps to a small group of the CIA. There would have been no public outcry or debate. This great boost to space exploration would not have occurred if the public had not remained ignorant of the space of Sputnik due to the excessive secrecy. It will undoubtedly surprise the public to learn that we find ourselves once again in a race for technological innovation." So it's like the Sputnik all over. We have to get going. We got to build this stuff. If people don't know, they don't realize there's a threat. And you see this over and over again in this thing. But I can absolutely assure you that this was carefully planned. I had said this way back last year that this was what was going to happen. They're going to do the movie thing. They've got $200 million. They're going to do numerous episodes there. Chris Blessa was part of that. He pulled out of that thing of doing these episodes, and they're going to spin the story through, as he called it, like they have the three versions. They have the education, information. They had the three things. So the education is what they're doing yesterday, and the innovation is the money and the technology stuff, and
and I've got to cut you off right there. Yeah. And I'm sorry, we're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to go over this when we get back. I'm Erica Lukes here with Grant Cameron. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Join the hosts of the American Ghost Hunter Show each week as they shoot from the hip without holding back.
They're kind of unpredictable, not like the rest of us.
Live every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come hear some of the hottest authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world on the American Ghost Hunter Show.
Our survival depends upon it.
Hauntings, UFOs, cryptos. If it's branded paranormal, we'll be talking about it. The American Ghost Hunter Show. Live Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The only question you have to ask yourself, Are you ready for it?
Yeah! All right!
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. A lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
That's just one adoption story that started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
What if maintaining a healthy weight was as simple as drinking a cup of coffee? With Valentis coffee, it's that easy. Harvested from the world's most pristine coffee farms and packed with the purest ingredients on earth, Valentis takes losing weight to a completely new level. At Valentis, we believe everyone deserves a chance to be healthy and fit. It's pure, natural, healthy, and delicious. Click the Valentis Healthiest Coffee banner on the KCOR Digital Radio Network website and take the Weight Loss Guarantee Challenge. Valentis Coffee, simply the world's healthiest coffee.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
How does this technology not scare the hell out of you?
It does scare the hell out of me.
Have you never seen either version of Westworld, for God's sake?
I've seen both. Got some hot robots.
Do you not own a pair of vice grips or any kind of anything with moving parts whatsoever?
No.
And it's not creepy at all.
I like the real thing. Thank you.
And when the junk gets hung up, just shut the power off.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I'm jumping in with my clothes on.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb, but if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Learn more at ultimatepartyfoul.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here and see my friends in chat. Thank you for tuning in. This is an important show. So, last half hour, we were talking about Joe Firmage, portals, flawed messiahs, Tom DeLonge, evil aliens, so much. But I think that there is absolutely no doubt that right now we're seeing another master plan of manipulation in play, and we're talking about that right now with my guest Grant Cameron, who has done significant work on all of this. His book, Managing Magic, The Government's UFO Disclosure Plan, is incredible. You can buy that on his website, the President's UFO website. It's presidentialufo.com. Also go there and check out his incredible bio. Grant knows more than anyone that speaks about this, what is really going on, the key players, the 14 magicians, the 5 messiahs, the chosen ones, all of this. And this week we have seen some interesting turns of events, and really I will say that we need to take this seriously. So for those of you who like to dismiss what happened, that's a huge mistake. Grant, welcome back, and thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. It's been an interesting week.
I bet you are exhausted.
Oh, it's just the first thing I did when it happened. Well, first we were trying to get on. I don't know how many of your listeners had that problem, but there was a story. I was talking to Linda last night. I was on her show, and she watched. I let her know it was happening, and she was watching it, and she had the numbers that it was like they tried to crash. She was asking me, why would they crash his broadcast? Because if you remember right at the very beginning, everything was muted on his. You had to sort of unmute yourself on his thing, and we were trying to figure out. So I went to Facebook, and then my Facebook was down. My Facebook went offline, and so there was all this stuff that somebody was trying to jam his show. That apparently there was only 1,500 people on at one time at the very beginning, and so I said, well, one of the things I think may be true is that there's these varying camps, that there are people who are pro, who are against, and that he may have been have some people supporting him inside the government, but there were people that were trying to take him down as well. That you have these interactions, and a lot of people don't realize that inside the CIA, for example, you have lots of people who are very, very religious, who believe in the end of the world scenario and the devil, and that supposedly, according to Scott Jones, that was one of the reasons the remote viewing program was shut down in 1995, was because of these very religious people inside the CIA who thought this was demonic, that they wanted this shut down. So people have to realize, number one, that there's these interacting divisions inside the government, sort of sabotaging each other, or from people who know. And then the other thing that I sort of try to remind people is that in as much as I don't believe there's any evil aliens, I don't really believe there's any evil government guys either. If you go back to, there's a picture I always show when I lecture of George Bush Sr., with his kids, his grandkids, and I think maybe even great-grandkids, where he has this family picture at Christmas, and it's got like 50 people in the picture. And I'm pretty sure that George Bush does not put the picture up on his desk first thing in the morning and then sit there for the rest of the day trying to figure out how to destroy the world. Everybody thinks they're saving the world, no matter how deluded they may be. And a lot of them are deluded as to how they think the world works. But basically, everybody thinks they're saving the world. So, and I've had interactions with a lot of these people. And the one I sort of have had interactions the most with is I chased the presidents. And then I realized that there was these people who briefed the president. And the first guy was a guy by the name of Art Lundahl, who ran the Navy photographic lab when the Robertson panel report happened, and he ended up taking over the National Photographic Interpretation Center, was absolutely fascinated with UFOs, and was the first sort of operator of the CIA Weird Desk, where all the UFO and paranormal phenomena stuff was handled. And they was taken over from him, from Kit Green, and then Ron Pandolfi. So I've been chasing Ron Pandolfi around for, well, probably 20 years. And if the rumor's true, he's briefed the last 6 presidents on UFOs. He's the guy that basically runs the whole show. He knows exactly how it runs and stuff like that. And I deal a lot with his best friend, who's Dan Smith, who's had a conversation with him every day for 26 years. So when the thing broke yesterday, I fed this thing immediately back to Dan Smith. I said, okay, Dan, I want to do an interview on Zoom. I want to put it on my site, on my White House UFO YouTube site. And so I basically didn't ask him, what do you think? I said, okay, so what does Ron say? What does Ron say? What happened today? And you're trying to feed it in, because the story, both from Chris Bledsoe and from Ron Pandolfi's rumored plausible deniability stories, is that there are multiple teams. Chris says there are 6 teams that are out there that are in process of disclosing this thing, that they have decided that they're going to get this thing out. So the people who think that there's evil people inside the government, I know a lot of these people, and they are all just ordinary people. They may be totally deluded, but they're ordinary people who have kids like you and I, who actually think that they're saving the world. So what I did is I went back to Dan, and I said, okay, what does Ron say? And he says, well, hell put off as a crook. And then this other thing that came today, that this Chris Mellon guy has been in this thing since the 1980s, which would mean almost 30 years that this guy has been in this thing, because everybody thought, the people that were talking to him thought, it was like he just joined the team, that he suddenly, saw the light and decided to join the UFO team. And Ron said, nah, this guy's been in this thing for years. I mean, you got to know where you're coming from on this thing. So that's what I see, is that you have all these different teams. And I sort of hypothesize a story that most people may not be familiar with, is, if you remember a couple of months ago, Donald Trump talked about defunding the Syrian rebels. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he did that, all the newspapers picked up on the fact that he had talked about a black ops operation, and that the minute the president talks about something, it's declassified. And you see this happen with the Area 51 story. The Area 51 term was declassified when Barack Obama stood up at the Kennedy Center the day after John Podesta joined his administration, and said, when you become president, everybody always asks you about Area 51. And I didn't know what was going on, So I phoned Shirley MacLaine, and he's doing this joke. I phoned Shirley MacLaine to find out what was going on in Area 51. And, of course, everybody laughs, and Shirley's laughing. And then he says, I'm probably the first president ever to openly talk about Area 51. At that moment, Area 51, the term is declassified because the president's talked about it. And so what I was told is there was these 6 teams, and I kept asking, well, what has changed? What actually changed? Where suddenly we've got all these teams that they got to get this thing out. There's the Tom DeLonge team. Supposedly Stephen Greer has they're using him as one of these teams to put it down. You have Chase Brandon in Hollywood putting stuff. There's now six shows last year that introduced portals into the show. So you have that team, then you have the Tom DeLonge team, and you have all these different things. I said, what changed? And the date that seemed to be popping up was the beginning of 2016. So I looked back, and what may have happened, and this may actually be true, that the president actually declassified the UFO subject. Because what happened, if you take a look, in November of 2015, Barack Obama gives an interview to GQ magazine. And in that interview, he's asked a question that he was asked lots of times during his presidency, is the thing about the Book of Secrets. Mr. President, you're the big guy. You have control of everything. Do you ever get to see the secrets? And Barack starts in on UFOs, and he says, everybody always asks me, when I became president, everybody always asks me about the UFOs and Roswell and the aliens. And I just want to let you know that top secret stuff isn't as exciting as you think it is. And so he's basically verifying the fact, forget about the cover-up, there's top secret stuff, but it's not that exciting. And I always make a joke that the GQ magazine guy, he basically threw him this softball, basically opened the whole subject up. And what does the guy do? He either had a stroke or he fell asleep or something, because his next question was, would you like to be a Supreme Court justice? It's like he basically said UFOs are for real. And he asked, "Do you want to be a Supreme Court justice?" And that it falls through the cracks, so he doesn't get asked about it again. But that may have been what triggered this thing, is that people don't understand. People always say to me, okay, the CIA did this, the CIA did. The CIA doesn't do anything. The CIA does what it's told to do. It's just an organization. It's responsible to the President of the United States. Its director is appointed by the President of the United States. Its job is to provide intelligence for the President of the United States. The same as the other 17 intelligence agencies that we know of are all doing the same thing. They provide information, class material to the President of the United States, to the head of the Senate and House Intelligence Committee, and to the executive branch. That's the only thing they do. They don't sell Trump steaks. They don't sell cars. They don't do anything else. All they do is provide intelligence. So when something happens inside the CIA, you can bet that the president has green lighted it. The CIA is not doing their own thing. They're doing what they're told to do. So in the 2 days before Barack Obama leaves the White House, all these millions of pages of remote viewing UFO documents are put on the internet. That did not happen. The CIA did not make that decision without green lighting from the president. So the president's giving these nods and winks. He knows what's going on, but they protect the president by making him look stupid. So if it comes to Russia, Iran-Contra, Whitewater, the president doesn't know anything. He's a dummy. He doesn't know what's going on. He never was involved with anything. It's always the people below who are going to take the fall, because the Secretary of Defense can go down, the Secretary of State can go down, but the president can't go down, because if the president goes down, the country goes down. So you have this plausible deniability thing that's built around the whole UFO issue, that they want you to think the president doesn't know. The president's an idiot. There's this deep, dark cabal. They want you going down some dark alley, with a dead end on it, looking for the evil cabal, the Wizard of Oz, to find who's running the UFO cover-up, when it's the president. The president is in charge of all classification. All security, all classification is done through executive order. It's done out of the executive office of the president. It's not run by law. So all security comes out of the executive office of the president. The president knows, but they don't want you asking the president about UFOs. They want you to think that there's a cabal, so you leave the president alone. So there's this plausible deniability thing that is built into that aspect, and also Ron Pandolfi. What Ron Pandolfi does is he's had this conversation with this Dan Smith guy for 26 years, since 1991. And the way Dan describes it is, Ron will be talking to me, and he's his best man at his second wedding, godfather to his child. He'll say, Ron will leak something. He'll just say it. He'll only say it one time. And either my radar is on and I pick it up, or I don't pick it up. And he will not repeat it. And if anybody ever asks him, he'll deny it. And that's how it works. So he tells Dan Smith. Dan Smith puts it on his blog. Dan Smith tells me. So it's like the puppet master telling the puppet, and then the puppet tells me, and I'm a puppet, so I repeat the story, and it gets out. And if you phone him up, like what happened when the story was that he briefed Donald Trump and spent almost every day in December with Donald Trump, When that came out, Steve Bassett picked up on it. So Steve Bassett immediately phones Ron Pandolfi and says, Dan Smith said you briefed Donald Trump. Now, Dan Smith's lying. Never did. No. And it's plausible deniability. So it's all verbal. It's all, you can't prove anything. And that's how they leaked this story. And you can see that it's so complex and there's so many different ways they're leaking it and through different people that all they want is the sort of the story bouncing around. They want everybody talking about it. But nobody knows there's always mud in the water. They throw mud in the water so you can't tell who's telling the truth. And the prime example of that was I told you a story about the Holloman Air Force Base story, that when Bob told me the story, and he had the film in his hands, and he's actually now still got a top secret film that he didn't give back to the Air Force. So he had the top secret Holloman Air Force Base film, and he was told it was May of 1971. So I start telling the story, and I say May of 1971, and then suddenly they get Linda Howe into Kirkland Air Force Base, and they say, oh, the Holloman Air Force Base, we're going to give you the film, and it happened in March of 1964. So Linda starts telling the story, it was March 1964, and people say, oh, it was March 64. I said, no, it was May of 1971. No, they said it was March 64, and that's what they do, is the minute you've got a story that's close to the truth, they put somebody out to tell the same story and change the details. So now Erica and Grant are fighting about whether it's 64 or whether it's 83 or 72 or whatever date. You have all these different stories and everybody's fighting, and yet the people are getting acclimatized to the fact that maybe there was a landing at Holloman Air Force Base and that it came out, and that's how they move this stuff through. Hollywood is a big thing. The Holloman Air Force Base story. I was talking to Bob Emenegger, funny story, about the Holloman Air Force Base story, and I said, Bob, this story about them landing at Holloman and them waiting for this thing and being filmed as the thing landed, I said, if it weren't for the location, this sounds like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he said, what, I didn't tell you? And I said, no, you didn't tell me what? I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Steven Spielberg? And I said, no, you didn't tell me that. And this was 1975. He gave a copy to Steven Spielberg. In 1977, the movie comes out. And it's basically the same story, except it's changed the location. And then he said, I told you, Annie Spielberg, his sister, was a line producer working for me. And that she said Steven would like a copy of the documentary. So I provided him a copy. And then after the Close Encounters came out, Steven Spielberg's mother came to Bob Emenegger and said, I've seen your version of the landing, and I've seen Steven's version of the landing, and I like Steven's version better. So people don't realize this stuff's going in there, that the way it works is Hollywood is doing this kind of stuff, or you get a story or whatever. They can either do one of two things. They go and kill everybody in Hollywood, or they go into Hollywood and they say, oh, Erica, you're doing this movie, and I hear it's got the CIA in it. We'd like to help you out. Mm-hmm. We'll take you to Langley. We'll show you around. You can look through. And the agents actually complain about this, that they bring these actors into Hollywood, into Langley, where all these people are undercover, and people are trying to cover their faces with these actors walking around. But that's what they do. They say, and we'll take you out for lunch, and we'll show you how it works, and we'll give you some agents, and we'll advise you and stuff like that. Like, when Bob Emenegger made his documentary in 1975, he stated there was a CIA operative on the stage the entire time that they were filming this production. So that's how they do it. They just sort of manage people. They're not trying to kill people. They just nudge you in the right direction because they know they can't stop you from doing the story. They're just trying to manage the story by throwing mud in the water and by directing you in the right direction, trying to get you to say what they want you to say.
And the amazing thing to me, and you mentioned this earlier in the first segment, we don't see this in any other country. I mean, this is happening in the United States like so many. I mean, I really feel like that's why ufology or the people that are looking for answers get so sidelined, because we just have this muddying of the water. And I spent a couple weeks in Norway working with Erling Strand, and that's, what he said. It's like we need to share data, and we do that here, and we don't have these sorts of problems. And over here we just see a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's really quite curious. I don't understand the need for all of this game playing, but I definitely, before we go to break, I want to ask you. You talked about the 14 magicians, and I would like to know who those magicians are.
Well, okay. So you get the three key guys who ran the Weird Desk. So Arthur Lundahl from 54 to 69. Then Kit Green, this physiologist who's actually doing experiments. I don't know if you've heard about this. He's actually now doing experiments with experiencers and with highly psychic people. Have you heard this story? Because it's an interesting story if you haven't heard it.
I would love to hear that, and we need to definitely talk about that. That's
okay.
important.
So he's one. And then in 1983, Ron Pandolfi takes over. So Ron Pandolfi has run the Weird Desk since 83. So those are three of them. Then you have Chase Brandon, who was the guy who's in Hollywood. He's the guy that came onto Coast to Coast and said, "Oh, Roswell was real. It was extraterrestrial, and there were cadavers." And then he goes and he walks back in the shadows, and nobody even chases him. He just tells his story and then returns in. And he's the one that said, he wrote the book Christos Conundrum about how the CIA handled the Roswell crash. And he said, if you want a good story, read the book. If you want to learn something, read between the lines. And this is how they do it. And he basically described this, that the book was reviewed a number of times by the CIA, and he had a UFO book that was supposed to come out, and it still has not come out, that it was reviewed 8 times by the CIA. So if Erica, say, if you saved the world as a spy, you say, I would like to tell my story so my grandkids get it. They say, okay, you tell the story, you change this name, you change that name, you change this location, so nobody knows what it is. You fictionalize the story. So he was one. Then I have, who are some of the other magicians I have? Most of them are CIA people. The names are basically escaping me, but most of them are these high-level CIA guys, and this is their job. It's not their evil guys, but this is part of the job that they have, is to manage the story.
So Put-Off, Jacques Vallée, where do they fit into this?
Well, they are guys part of the Avery. So a lot of people have the Avery as this evil cabal type guy. And no, they're not. They're basically people like Hal Put-Off, Jacques Vallée, at some point in their career, whatever their career was, whether it's military, scientific, or government, they ran up against the UFO phenomena. And Kit Green is the prime example. He's a physiologist who ran the Weird Desk, but he was never briefed on the autopsies, the alien autopsies. The story I heard is he was trying to get briefed on the alien autopsies, and he was told he didn't have a need to know, even though he was a medical doctor. So that's the thing. They don't know the whole story. And then Bill Moore was using them. He's the one that created the names. The reason he created the names was so that he could talk about these people on the phone, so he could refer to the Penguin and the Falcon and all these different people, so nobody would know who they were talking about. So he's the one that gave them the names. And then these people suddenly realized, after Bill became public, they realized that there was these other people, and they started being used. For example, Bigelow brought all the Avery people into the NIDS group, because that's the thing. These people all have bits and pieces of the story, but the Avery all interact with each other because they realize they all know what security clearance. They can talk to each other without worrying about somebody leaking stuff, and they know that these other people have the answers. And John Alexander brought him on his UFO working group in the 1980s, and they just reappear. And now Tom DeLonge has got a lot of these people. So Jacques Vallée wrote the intro to his book. You got Hal Put-Off on there. John Alexander, for a long time, he's actually made a comment this morning, sort of supportive, sort of not supportive, but I heard for a long time that he was part of the DeLonge team, that he was involved. And so that's the thing, is everybody uses these Avery guys because they have the contacts and they've interacted with this phenomena. And that's how the Avery, they're not a cabal group. They're just a bunch of guys who are like you and I trying to figure it out. And at one point I did know some of them, and then I leaked something that I shouldn't have leaked about some guy talking to 2 different presidents. And then suddenly it just went silent. Nobody would talk to me anymore because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And to me it was like, this is MJ-12 too. I mean, these 12 new guys are going to figure it out, but they're never going to tell you either. It's almost like guys who collect wild game animals, and they've got, wild game on their wall down in the basement, but the only people that are going to see it are their buddies. Nobody else is going to know they did it. And that's the problem with the Avery, is they're as secretive as the government. They're trying to figure this thing out, but Put-Off is one of the people in the Avery.
So what about Colm Kelleher?
Well, he was mostly with NIDS. Now, I've never heard him referred to as an Avery guy, but he knew all the Avery people. So they would bring the Avery people in there, and I think Bigelow was paying them $3,000 a day to come in, and they would have 6 times a year. They'd bring them in for 3 days or 4 days. And I think Kelleher, the same as Eric Davis, I think was hired by Bigelow. It wasn't really the Avery. And he would have learned a lot of stuff from like people like Kit Green and Vallée and all these people that were brought in there, John Alexander, in these discussion meetings that they had. He would have learned a lot. But I've never heard him mentioned as one of the Avery people.
It's just interesting because he's working with DeLonge now, and I mean, like you said, he worked with NIDS and has a very close association with Bigelow, and so, and I I've had a couple interactions with him, and he's been very cordial. So, like you said, I think unfortunately we get this conspiracy theory mindset. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to that when we run rampant and all these, go down these different rabbit holes. And you said that these are just good people thinking that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And so what happens is the same in the UFO community. Somebody will say, "Oh, I'm against all this stuff," and then suddenly they'll say, "Oh, I got a source. I got a source, in the government or Area 51 telling me stuff." And it's like, well, you're doing the same thing. It's the old deal. It's like you get on the inside. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. So if you suddenly got a phone call from Tom DeLonge, the question is, would you take the call? He said, "Okay, we're having a meeting here with all these different people, and you can come in, and we'll let you in." You go, "Oh, maybe I should do that." Everybody would. That's what Bill Moore said. Every good researcher would do the same thing. If you got an offer to be on the inside, and I was given this offer. This is a guy that phoned me about U.S. intelligence. He said, "You can be in. Ron says you can be in, like Ron Pandolfi." And I said, "Well, I don't want to be in." And he said, "Well, I'll get you an executive producer, and you can be in on all the phone calls. Exactly what's going to happen." And I said, "Well, I don't want to be in." And I didn't tell him, but I'd rather be a chess player than a chess piece. And because I knew what happened to all these other guys, I said, "I don't want to be." And he said, "Well, if you're on the in, you get 100% of what's going on. If you're on the outside, you get 10 to 15%. I said, "I'll take the 10 to 15%. Because that's the deal is everybody, they hook you with this thing is, would you like to know the truth? We'll bring you in. And I've heard researchers that have told me that they were offered, and we will tell you, I think even Chris Blessa was told this, we'll tell you everything, but you can never talk about it again. And that's what they did with this Jim Semivan. We'll talk about it after because that's an important story.
Yes, we need to talk about Jim Semivan.
And how they brief these people, how people get to know what they know and when they get to know it.
And I want to ask you, I've got a couple questions from some of my listeners, and we definitely need to, talk about that. One is this Paul Benowitz? And I will have you answer that when we get back. I'm Erica Lukes here with Grant Cameron. This is a great show, and you're going to have to listen to it over and over to pick up all the details. We're taking a break. We'll catch you on the other side.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes, always happy to be here on UFO Classified. You can find me on Facebook or go to UFOclassified.com to learn more about the show, about me. Make sure you message me. I will always try to get back to you, and I appreciate all of my friends and supporters from all over the world taking your Friday night to be here with me. You know how passionately I care about this subject, and I want to make sure that we are all getting the best information that we can, and it is these are tricky waters to navigate. I know that firsthand, but this week we saw rock star Tom DeLonge announced the formation of his To the Stars Academy. And we've had a lot of fallout because of this. A lot of people in the UFO community saying that he is just in this solely to make money, and people saying that this is, we're being distracted and da-da-da-da-da. There's so many things at play here. But what I want to tell you and stress to you is this: none of this should be taken lightly, and you need to sit back and watch and see where it goes. In a quote from Rolling Stones magazine, Tom DeLonge said, "Some of this stuff is empowering and some of this stuff is frankly kind of scary, but you need to understand it and you're going to need to deal with it when we're gone." The tone of what he said and some of the people that he is working with, the team members at the press conference, was that it is a bit alarming to me. I know that this is something that poses a national security. We should be cognizant of that, but to alarm people, and, to me, this is really important, and we need to talk about this. Grant Cameron is with me. He is an incredible researcher and knows more than anybody on this subject because he's been dealing with this forever. But Grant, welcome back. I mean, this is mind-blowing to me, and you know so much, and so many of the key players. We were talking about the magicians and then the five messiahs. I mean, it's basically the same key players, and then you've got the messiahs. And we had a question from the chat room from Scott Brown about Benowitz. Yeah.
Okay, let me first back up on this thing about, because this discussion is the Tom DeLonge thing a good thing? Is he about to break it, or is this a bad thing? Is he being taken for a ride? As I said at the beginning, there's only three options. They're disclosing, they're not disclosing, they're doing something in between. This is not disclosure, and it is not Tom DeLonge being taken for a ride. It is something in between. They've been doing the same thing for 70 years. This is how you get the story out. This is how they got Area 51 story. What has happened yesterday is it was all scripted. They were reading, like, if you see, they were in a very defensive pose. They were all sitting there with their hands over their groin. And they were in a very defensive pose. They were all very quiet. And when they stood up, you could tell they were clearly reading from a script. This happened before in 1988. 2 weeks before the end of the Reagan administration, Reagan was very interested in UFOs. He, I believe, green-lighted this project. It was called UFO Cover-Up Live. And if you ever hear people talk about it, they say, that was the worst documentary in the world. They were reading off cue cards. It was absolutely horrible. It was the worst documentary ever. And we all knew back in 1988, I remember dealing with Billy Cox, we were going back and forth as to what was going to happen. We thought Reagan was going to appear on TV with a live alien, because that was the story when the live alien first came out. And what you see in UFO Cover-Up Live, and when I lecture about it, I say, everybody says, oh, it's a dumb thing. And I say, if you watch closely what they're doing, they're leaking the story around. They use bad scripts. They use, all this kind of stuff where people have the doubt. They want you to doubt this thing, because then you can't figure it out. And in the UFO Cover-Up Live, October 1988. You can still find it on the internet. There's a flow chart that appears on there. And it's the flow chart that shows how the UFO cover-up is controlled from the president on down. And a lot of the stuff is very obvious. You got the Defense Intelligence Agency, and you've got the CIA and this sort of stuff. And I say, if you take a look on the bottom right-hand side of that flow chart, it's got Area 51 on it. This was October of 1988 when this documentary was produced, so it was written before that. Bob Lazar would not go on Area 51 till December of that year. The story would not be broken by George Knapp until the spring of the next year. Already, Area 51 is on a flowchart in a documentary that was aired on Fox News to the American people in October. The second thing that's on that flowchart is in the bottom left-hand corner. It has the DIA Parapsychology Research Unit. That is the remote viewing program before it went to the CIA. In 1988, it was run by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Then Ron Pandolfi was trying to get it back to kill it, to bring it into the CIA, and they were fighting. They wouldn't put him on the list to allow him on the list, so he couldn't get control of the program. Eventually, there was a thing in Congress. They moved it back to the CIA, and Ron shut it down, or that's the story. basically what he did is he shut the remote viewing program and moved it from the white world CIA, where there's documents and accountability to Congress, and moved it to the black world, where remote viewing still goes on, but it's not that public. That's what you try to do, is you take it, same as Blue Book, you take it out of the white world, you move it into the black world. You continue to research, but you don't have to research in front of the public. So in 1988, they have this DIA parapsychology unit on that flowchart. It is not declassified until 8 years later, or 7 years later in 1995. So that's why I say, if you take a look and if you watch very closely and don't get all emotionally tied into the characters and whatever, and you start looking about what are they actually saying, you realize that they're actually putting out messages. They're putting out stories. They want this stuff out, but you can't go and stand in front of the public and say, this is what's going on, because once you spill the milk, it's over. You can't put the milk back into the glass. And in my book, Managing Magic, I read a chapter called The 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And if you're in their position, you realize why they're doing this gradual thing is because they're absolutely petrified. You hear Stephen Greer talk about the stock market melting down, and that could happen. You could have some guy who says, oil's not going to be worth anything. I think I'm going to get an algorithm. I'm going to build it into my computer, and we're going to start shorting the stock market on all these things that are going to be related to oil. You don't even need panic. All you need is some guy who decides he's going to start to make money in the stock market. He starts selling. His computers are selling. Then all the stop losses come in from all the guys that have those shares. They start selling, and this starts to melt down. And what do you do if the stock market starts to melt down? Because everybody thinks they're going to make a pile of money on the fact that you don't need oil anymore, and you don't even need the panic. So there's all these things that people have to keep into mind, that these guys, as I say, are doing the best they can to try to gradually release this. And that's what you see yesterday. It's almost like the 1988 documentary. It's carefully scripted. The people that are in there for a reason, and they are some very powerful people that are who they say they are. And what other people have to realize is that, because you always have this idea that there's evil government, that they all just sit there and they're all they think about all day is how to destroy the world for their children. But one of the people that's in there, his name is Jim Semivan, and he was one of the guys that did not speak. Now, Jim Semivan, I've known about for 2 years, and I actually put this in through Ron Pandolfi about this Jim Semivan, and it went, and Dan Smith put it on his blog, and it was immediately moved down. And Ron Pandolfi said to take this down and do not post lies from loons, which is referring to me making this statement about Jim Semivan. So I kept insisting, yes, I know this guy exists. I know because he's good friends with Chris Bledsoe. He had contacted Chris Bledsoe. And then I started producing pictures. So I sent the pictures in through Dan Smith to the CIA. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, he does exist. It's real. He's real, but that's not his name. And now they've gone back after the documentary or the Delonge thing aired. Now they're back to the fact he doesn't exist. And it's like, come on, give me a break. You know he exists. He is a very, very high level. And what people don't realize, that a lot of the people that are in this game that have joined this team are on there because they've got a job. They've come out of Lockheed Skunk Works. Okay, now you have to go to Tom DeLonge. We need you to work on this disclosure. We're going to leak this stuff. You go and tell him a little bit of this, tell him about that. You're released on your security clearance, and you're to tell them this. And the other thing people don't realize is a lot of these people are experiencers. And Jim Semivan, who was a briefer for the President of the United States, I can absolutely guarantee you he was a briefer for the President of the United States. He would go into Bush's office, and I know what his position was, that he would put what his job was, he'd put it on the president's desk. The president would not even read it. He would just sign off. He ran a whole unit within the CIA, one of the most important units. He was a very powerful guy, but the thing was, he's an experiencer. He had the beings in his room in the early 1990s, and I've heard the description of the beings, and his wife was bleeding, and he wondered what is going on. And he as he described he writes the foreword to Tom DeLonge's book, and he said, when I had that experience, it shattered my view of reality. And the idea that you can measure this, the whole idea of the nuts and bolts thing, the idea that you can measure this is laughable. How do you define something where there does not appear to be any there? This has got to do with consciousness. This has got to do with multidimensionality, which is true. It is much more complex than simply ETs in metal tin cans flying around. It's very, very complex. And so he's an experiencer. And that's why he contacted Chris Bledsoe. And the story was that and this was told to me, I've heard it from a couple sources now, that when he had the experience, he goes to Ron Pandolfi, because Ron Pandolfi's the CIA UFO guy. And he said, I had this experience. And his wife was freaking out. His wife was really upset about this whole thing. She just sort of went into shock over what had happened. And he said, I've had this experience with my wife. I need to know what's going on. And from what I heard, and Ron has denied this story, he said, this is absolute garbage. And that's what he said. Take this down. Don't post lies from loons. So I heard this story. And what it said was he went to Ron Pandolfi, said, I need to know what happened last night. You're the guy. I need a briefing. And Ron said, you're not cleared to know. And he said, I'm not cleared to know? Let me tell you what, Ron, you bring your boss's boss into my office and we'll see who's not cleared to know. And they brought somebody in his office and they said to Jim Semivan, he's a briefer for the president up until 2008. And they say, Jim, you don't need this. Pretend it's a one-off was the expression I heard. Pretend it's a one-off. Pretend it only happened one time. Hope it never happens again. You do not want this in your career because this will ruin your career. You do not want this in your career. So he agreed with this. He allowed it to go. He was watching the UFO thing. He knew about Chris Bledsoe. He knew the whole UFO thing, but he was not allowed while he was in this special briefer to the president to talk to anybody. And the minute he leaves the CIA, he is briefed. He is given the briefing, and this ties into what happened yesterday. He's given the briefing, and now he's allowed to interact with the UFO community, and he's getting it out, not because he's this evil guy who wants to destroy the world. It's because he believes this should be brought forward. There's a high-level NASA guy who I know as well. He told me about his experience, about how he had this company, sold it for millions of dollars, put an experiment on the space shuttle. He said, I'll tell you what, Grant, the morning I woke up with that idea in my head that I put on the space shuttle where I couldn't get it on, I had some guy sign off to get this experiment on the space shuttle. That idea came to me during the night. And the last thing I remember was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. And I said, could you see its face? He said, no, I couldn't see its face. So people have to realize that if there's 10% experiencers in the public, there's 10% experiencers in high-level government. And these people want an answer the same as you and I. And that's what Jim Semivan is. Jim Semivan is a guy who wants the answer out there. And he's playing the game. We're going through this national security thing. Because the thing is, how do you release it if you get it? So this is, I believe, what they're doing is they're doing this sort of a half thing. This could be a threat, but we have no indication it's a threat, but it could be. So we need to sort of open up because you can't just come out and say it's for real. And you have these high-level people who have had contact. And the story that's actually told is, and I've heard this from 3 different sources, that Kit Green, who was before Ron Pandolfi, who ran the Weird Desk from 79 to 83, actually is the guy. If you're say you get the job as Secretary of Defense or whatever, and then suddenly you go in and say, oh, I've got these dreams and I'm seeing these aliens. They send you to Kit Green. And Kit Green puts you in an MRI machine. And Kit Green gives you all sorts of neurological tests. And he tries to determine, are you crazy? Are you hallucinating? Or are you an abductee? Because that's what they're studying. They're picking up these people. And they actually have put these people through. The guys from Rendlesham Forest have gone through this. Chris Bledsoe's gone through this. They've done all sorts. And Kit Green has put 100 people through this operation where he's volunteering his own time with Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan, who runs the lab, the Nolan lab at Stanford University. And he's the guy that did the analysis of the little being, the little 6-inch being for Stephen Greer. That's where he comes from. He's a geneticist. And what they do is they look at the genetics of experiencers and the genetics and the brain pattern. And what they state by looking at very highly psychic people like Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, and all experiencers is that they have a brain pattern that they call the antenna. And so I actually asked Chris, I said, Chris, did they ever refer to you as an antenna? And he was very uncomfortable. And he said, yeah, I've heard that term. And this is the thing. They know this. They know this whole thing that these people have. And the other thing that I've heard from a number of sources is that there's a genetic marker that is there from birth in all experiencers, that this genetic marker is there. So they are doing this in Stanford University. They're actually doing clear experiment where they're going to actually produce material. And Kit Green has gone to a number of researchers. I'm trying to get a woman who wrote for Psychology Today interested in this story to talk to Kit Green, because he's looking to leak this story to somebody. He wants this written up by somebody, that they are actually watching experiencers. They're not stupid. They know what's going on. And that's what Pandolfi had said. I can't remember who he said it to, but he said, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch the people that the phenomena is interacting with.
So I have to just interrupt. I have to ask you, so how do they know who the phenomena is interacting with?
Well, if you take a look at Chris Bledsoe, and you know Chris Bledsoe, I mean, he's a very high-level experiencer. He's you can tell if they've got contact. Like they have these interactions. They're able to produce objects whenever they say they're going to produce objects, and so it's almost like music or like art. Or there's some people who are better than others, but there are some people who are clear. The same as psychics. So they pick up on Uri Geller and they pick up Ingo Swann. They had a lot of remote viewers and psychics, but they picked the really good ones, and they realized that the people are really good. And Chris Bledsoe is, from what I understand, the highest level that there is. He's the clearest channel that there is.
So how did they find out about Bledsoe? Was it through MUFON, because MUFON did an extensive investigation about that?
They found out about through a woman by the name of Diane Posoka, who's the head of religion at the University of North Carolina. She works with Jacques Vallée, and she also works with a guy at Rice University. She's the one that discovered Chris Bledsoe, and she's the one that was working on with Warner Brothers, with some of the movie stuff on paranormal stuff. She was an advisor to Warner Brothers. She's the one that actually discovered Chris, and the words started to get around. They saw the documentary, and they started doing these checks. And then this NASA guy picked up on him. Then I had this very bizarre experience with him in 2013, and I started making very public, got him on radio shows and stuff like that. And then he would do stuff like he would say, like the one time he was taking pictures, he had a high-speed camera, and he was taking pictures of the burning tree, this burning tree that he has, and he'd take 5 pictures with this high-end camera very fast in the dark. And I said, why would you do that, Chris? Where did you get that from? And he said, oh, so-and-so told me to do this, one of these high-level guys. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. And it's like they're actually telling him what to do. It's like they're testing him, they're looking, and that's where John Alexander goes. So John Alexander is a guy who, I don't know who he's working for or what he's doing or whatever, but as soon as he hears that Chris has got this, he seems to be this clear channel guy, this antenna, he goes to Chris, and he's trying to figure out, is this for real? What he wants to talk to the guy, he wants to be around the guy, and he goes there, and then Chris says, hang on, they're here. I can feel them. Because once you've been one with the ship, once you've interacted with the ship like Chris has, where he's flown the ship, he's put his hand on the pad and he's flown the ship, he becomes one with the ship. So when the ship is in the area, he can sense the ship is there. And he said, it's here. Hang on. And then they look up and this big, huge thing appears above them and goes flying off into the south. And John said it was, one of the most dramatic experiences of his life. And so when John goes back, then he tells all these people, and they say, this guy's for real. And Semivan picks up, and Semivan actually went to Chris Bledsoe's birthday party. So Semivan once he retired from the CIA, he started interacting with Chris, and he defended Chris. He basically told Tom DeLonge, I want you to take Chris's story. I want you to take it to Hollywood. I want you to make it happen. Tom DeLonge doesn't want it. He doesn't believe in the good experiences from, most people are talking about the good thing. These are evil aliens. He's not interested in experiencers or channelers or contactees. Right. So he didn't really want anything to do with Chris Bledsoe, but he was told to do it. So you got to realize that there are people in this operation that are behind this thing who are experiencers, who are trying to get this thing because they themselves are trying to find the answer.
So, and I just have to ask you, as far as people, Kit Green and these studies with Gary Nolan, and how are they finding people that have these genetic markers? Are they looking through databases? Are they just looking through the media sources and then finding people that are good and then approaching them? Or how is this happening?
Well, I'm not sure how he does it. I don't know how he got 100 people, but he would have access to like the MUFON database, because this is all just like going straight into. They probably had intelligence from day one. And then Jacques Vallée, like you're going through the Avery, so you're getting these contacts, or they're going through literature, they're contacting people. The ones I know for sure are Chris Bledsoe and the Rendlesham Forest guys, because they're looking at people who've been injured as well, and they're talking about the electromagnetic field. Like Chris Bledsoe has been injured. He has this thing where he's got sort of like, it's almost like arthritis, and apparently it comes from touching the craft when it's powered up. You're told never to touch the craft when it's powered up, and so a lot of them have injuries, and a lot of the ones that Kit Green is talking about are special forces people, and he's saying there's some savants, special forces, super high IQ people. So he may be getting them out of the military, because that's what happens is when you're in the government, that's the story I was told, is that when you're in the government and you start experiencing abduction phenomena, they send you to Kit Green. So that's where he would have these people, and he would run them through these tests where he's finding out, are you crazy? Now he's moved to the thing, and he's doing it apparently on his own dime, because he's fascinated with this subject. Is he's doing the thing about, is the genetic marker there? Is there a special brain pattern? And what they're saying is that all, like Uri Geller and like, for example, you would have experience, you've had experiences, so it's you and Uri Geller and Ingo Swann all have the same brain pattern, that if you were to go through this test, you would show the same brain pattern. And the thing is to get it public, that right now they're sort of talking to people about it, like they talked to Annie Jacobson from page 394 to 400 in Annie Jacobson's book Phenomena. She has this long interview with Kit Green where they talk about this program. So this stuff is starting to open up, and this is hard material. This is going to be analytical data that they're going to produce, the same as Jacques Vallée is doing the thing with the metal that's been found, where he's doing those kind of experiments. We're starting to get pretty close now to producing actual material that the scientific community is not going to be able to argue with. It's not analytical. It's not anecdotal stories and stuff like that. So
that's wow. And we're getting ready to go to break, and I know that we still need to talk about Benowitz because Scott has been so patient. There's so much to ask, and it is, and this is this is so good, and I'm going to have you back on probably next week. I hope you're not busy.
I love to talk. You know that.
I know, I love it. And I'm Erica Lux here with Grant Cameron, and you can definitely, I would recommend getting Managing Magic, and I will talk about that when we get back. See you on the other side of the break.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lux.
Erica Lux.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lux on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
There's a show that's not afraid to ask questions no one else will ask. Not afraid to say
what no one else will say.
Friday nights at 7 p.m. Listen to Restricted Airspace with Tina Marie, where no topic is off limits. Conspiracy theories, paranormal activities, hoaxes, the unexplained. It's what we talk about. Question everything. Trust no one. Restricted Airspace with Tina Marie. Friday at 7 p.m. on the KCOR Digital Radio Network out of Las Vegas, Nevada.
This is the world famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
5D Events invite you to Las Vegas, October 20th through the 22nd for the International Symposium of Quantum Consciousness and Healing at the Alexis Park All-Suite Resort located at 375 East Harmon Avenue. For tickets and info, go to 5devents.com. That's the numeral 5devents.com. Keynote speakers, lectures, workshops, panels, exhibits, a documentary film, and a dinner banquet on Saturday are all part of this amazing 3-day epic event, Friday, October 20th through Sunday, October 22nd from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. daily at the Alexis Park All-Suite Resort in Las Vegas. This is a global gathering raising consciousness, healing, peace, and transformation. Keynote speakers include Andrew Basiago, Jordan Maxwell, John Lear, David Adair, Professor Marin Kesh, and Dr. Sam Osmanagich. That's the International Symposium of Quantum Consciousness and Healing, October 20th through 22nd at the Alexis Park All-Suite Resort in Las Vegas. For tickets and info, go to 5devents.com. That's the numeral 5devents.com.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie.
featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about. At least, not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
That's good.
Turn your radio up.
I love it. All the music I want to hear. This is my station.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. For Hyperspace. The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride?
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified, and I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, for reaching out to me, and it is really amazing to see people contact me from all over the world who've had experiences, who understand that there's something more going on, and are truly searching for the truth. And it is clearly, if you listen to the first three segments, it is hard to find, and that's unfortunate. We can thank a lot of what's going on in America for the muddied waters. My guest tonight is Grant Cameron. He has done lots of research on all of this, and you can go to presidentialufo.com to learn more about Grant, which hopefully you know because he's really important, and you can look at Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan, which is his latest book. We have been talking about Tom DeLonge and then the magicians and some of the players and how this field is manipulated and all of the information is managed. And we had a question about Benowitz.
Okay, I see it completely different than most people, and I was actually there. I was involved with Bill Moore. Bill Moore had helped me in my investigation. He was the only guy that backed me. So I saw Bill Moore in a completely different light than everybody else. He was the smartest guy in the room, no doubt about it. He just had this ego, and that's the way they hooked him in, is they said, you're the only guy who knows what you're talking about. 3 days later or 4 days later, he's on another radio talk show, and he gets this phone call from off at Air Force Base. You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about, and they had him hooked, and he got dragged into this thing. And basically, the Benowitz story is the same. It's got really nothing to do with UFOs. If you, say, get a hold of the atomic bomb secret or any other secret, they're going to run you. And the thing that people always forget about the Benowitz thing is that he had this facility on the edge of Kirkland Air Force Base. And people never talk about how it started. What did he actually see? What he saw, what he reported to the U.S. Air Force was that he saw UFOs over the Manzano weapons storage area, which was the biggest depository of nuclear weapons in the world. Same story. You go to Rendlesham Forest, they'll be talking about their whole story. And as soon as you say, was there a blue beam that went down into the nuclear weapons storage area? It's like, dead silence. Doesn't matter who you talk to in that Rendlesham story. You cannot talk about this. This is highly classified. And so he's talking about nuclear weapons, and there's a big nuclear connections weapon thing to the aliens. This is actually my last book after Managing Magic was Charlie Red Star, which is the story of how it started with me in 1975. And I connect it to nuclear weapons. That when I had the sightings in 1975, they built the only operational anti-ballistic missile unit in the world in Nakoma, North Dakota. They had 300 nuclear missiles, Minuteman III, 3 warheads each. Then they put another 100 nuclear missiles to try to shoot down the Russian missiles that were going to try to take out the American missiles. So they had all these missiles, and suddenly we had all these UFO sightings. So there's this big, and there's been books written about it. Robert Hastings wrote the book UFOs and Nukes. There's this big, huge connection to nuclear incidents, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, and UFOs. And they did not want Benowitz talking about that. So they've got to run them. And what they use is Richard Doty. And people have to remember, Richard Doty is a counterintelligence officer. That's his job. So if you happen to get, one of my friends got the code name for the stealth fighter. Well, they were on his doorstep immediately. And it was like they started to distract him, and it's like, where did you get this from? And they're trying to find out because there's a leak. So they don't want you talking. So that's why they send Benowitz off on this thing about underground aliens and stuff. They had to get him away from the story, and they did, because nobody's ever picked up the story that it was actually nuclear weapons. The same as when I have the other thing that people don't realize. There's a guy by the name of David Perkins. I don't know if you've ever had him on a show. He did the filming for Linda Howe when she did Strange Harvest, and he claims to have one of the best, or if not the best, catalog of cattle mutilation sightings. And he says that all cattle mutilation sightings, according to him, are downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, whether it be atomic testing or whether it's weapons and stuff like that. And he stated that in 1997, the National Cancer Institute did a study on cancer rates downwind of where they did the nuclear above ground testing. And that he said that they produced this map. The National Cancer Institute, 1997, produced this map that showed hotspots of cancer incidents downwind. And he said, if you take that map and you put it over the cattle mutilation map, it's a direct match. Totally match. So you have this thing, and that's what they don't want you to know. They don't want you to get into the idea that nuclear weapons, because that raises very serious issues that you don't really want to deal with, because you have one classified issue above another. So I say the Benowitz thing is no different than anything else. If you'd picked up the fact that they were building a nuclear bomb or something like that, they're going to run you. That's their job, is to get you away from the story. And he was a very unstable guy. He was a chain smoker. He was very edgy and stuff. And so the story is that, these evil guys came and they ran this guy. There was all sorts of people that were involved in this story at Kirkland Air Force Base. And then they bring Linda in, and they ran counterintelligence on her by distracting her. So people have to look at the entire story. It's not just simply the fact that they decided they had to kill this guy. People forget how this thing started. And Benowitz was onto something. He was a smart guy. He had picked this up. He was filming this stuff. And one of the stories that people don't know, they accuse like Bill Moore and these people of doing this. One of the stories Bill Moore tells is that, and we knew the story in that time, is that when he was doing this, they gave him a computer. And they gave him a computer that said it would help track the UFOs, the aliens. You could track it on this computer. And the computer was provided to him by none other than J. Allen Hynek. And that's what Bill Moore said. He said everybody was into this thing. I got accused of doing this. He said I could name off all the people. There was all sorts of researchers doing it, because everybody, once you get an in, some government official comes to you and says, oh, I'm here to tell you the secrets. And everybody falls for the bait. Everybody jumps in. So everybody's doing it today, not just in the 1980s.
Right. And so I've got to ask you, and thank you for that. I'm sure Scott is excited that you answered that. And I just want to know, so when you look at the people that the government or the groups are approaching, and you had said that they all have some sort of character flaw, they need to have their egos stroked or and so how do, as people who are trying to navigate through these waters, how do we understand when we're being played and what, give us a little bit more information so we can be smarter when we're moving forward.
Okay, well, what you have to realize if you're on the outside. So what happens yesterday is these guys come forward, and everybody says, "Oh, look at this! This guy came forward. He's from Lockheed. This guy's from the Defense Department. This guy's from the CIA. Look, these guys step forward." The first question you got to ask is, why is this guy doing this? Because you're not supposed to be doing this. This is the most, according to the Canadian government top secret document from 1950, this is the most highly classified subject in the United States. So you have to first say is, when somebody comes to me, I remember one guy, it was funny, one guy came to me and he said, "I got all these documents. I want to get them out, and you're into documents and stuff." And I said, and he was just using a first name or whatever. I said, first question is like, "Okay, so why are you not in jail?" I mean, if it's classified, if someone comes to you and says, "I've got classified material," and I'm going to tell you, it's like Tina mentioned, people go through lie detectors, and they can pick you off. If you've leaked something to somebody else, or you have this CIA guy that comes into when the citizens' hearing came. This guy comes on camera supposedly from the CIA, the guy that said he told Eisenhower, that he was going to take the message on to Area 51, and Eisenhower couldn't get on, and that Eisenhower said, "I'll send the First Army in unless." And this guy's just this low-level CIA guy, and he comes on camera, and he's Mr. X. And so he's Mr. X, and his face is on camera, and it's like, people cannot see this? Come on. The guy, how long is it going to take the CIA to figure who this guy is? He's on camera. And I knew that Richard Dolan was going to do the interview with him before it happened. So if I knew Richard Doty was doing the interview with him, the CIA certainly knew. This guy would not come forward. People don't really question. If somebody comes forward and says, "I'm going to give you all these secrets," the first question you got to ask him is, why are you not in jail? This is classified. Why are you a patriotic American citizen? Yeah. Did you take an oath to uphold the Constitution and obey the law? Yeah. Then why are you leaking top secrets? This is classified stuff. You go to jail for this. And according to the WikiLeaks guy, he said it's 10 years per incident. So if you leak 10 stories, it's 10 times 10 years in jail. This is very serious stuff to be leaking stuff. So when someone comes and says, "I've got highly classified material," and you're the guy I've picked to give it, you better get ready to duck, because he can't have classified material. He can't be putting this stuff out. And so when I've never had anybody except for that one guy, and what it turned out was that he had gotten the documents from the Douglas aircraft stuff that was done in the 1960s. Douglas aircraft was trying to figure out UFOs, and it was run by Robert Wood. They spent 2 years to spend $500,000 more than Blue Book to try to investigate UFOs, and they gave up. They couldn't figure out what was going on because Douglas aircraft figured they were going to get the technology, and it was those documents he had from one of the guys in the program. And when I put it out, Robert Wood was furious. "How did you get these documents?" And I said, "Well, this guy and they weren't classified documents. They were there were documents from this company," and that was the only time other than that, I've never had anybody come to me and say, I'm a top secret guy and I'll give you classified material, probably because they know I'm going to ask them why you're not sitting in jail. And the other thing is, I've never had anybody threaten me. I've gone after the president. I've gone after the head scientist of the CIA and stuff. I mean, I should be the first guy that's been threatened. So when they threaten people, I always think that they want you. It's like Bob Lazar. They shot Bob Lazar's car. I said, if they want you dead, let me absolutely assure you, you're dead in 29 minutes. They aren't going to miss. They do this for a living. They're not going to drive by, and what they want you to do is think you're going to be being killed. They're managing the story at all ways. They're managing the witnesses. They're managing the story, the documents. They're leaking documents, and they've done it. There's more money spent on security for a program than for the program. So they know what they're doing, and people have to be very cautious of whistleblowers and documents and stuff like that.
So I want to ask you, and that's great information, I want to ask you a little bit about the 6 different teams and their motivations. And, because to me, I've watched this demonic agenda, thing that is kind of moving its way through the field. And to me, that's alarming. I think that there is definitely a negative aspect, but at the end of the day, we don't know truly if this is extraterrestrial. We don't know if this is ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional. There's so many things at play here, and I think that jumping on the bandwagon of everything is a demon is really, really dangerous. But tell us about the teams and what their motivations are.
Well, to do the demon thing, I'm the farthest left on that. There's no demon, there's no evil aliens, there's there's not even evil. I mean, but we won't go down because that's a long discussion. But the 6 teams, I just heard this. There's 2 different sources. Chris Bledsoe talks about the multiple teams, and Dan Smith, through this plausible story from Ron, said there's multiple teams, and that makes sense. So the teams, I would say, are definitely, Delonge is definitely one of the teams. It's run by Jim Semivan, and Jim Semivan is the CIA guy that he claims to be. So that's one team. The second team is being run, this operation that's going to bring out this portal story. They're trying to get this portal story out.
So that's the Joe Firmage.
Well, the Joe Firmage is part of the story, but it's actually run by a guy, Kevin Albert. He's public now. He was sort of like the script writer, and they have this. I heard the producer's name that they want to run this thing. So Ron said, "I want a documentary on the Avery." That's why they contacted me, because I dealt with Bill Moore in the '80s, and so there's this documentary on the Avery, and the last 2 episodes are going to be on the portal, and that's where they drag Joe Firmage in. So
is that a good thing, bad thing? I mean, like we know with the DeLong camp, that's kind of it's taking a negative, almost a viewpoint on this whole subject. So is the portal thing, is that good, bad, indifferent?
It's more good. It's more the idea. I like the portal thing if they can get that out, because it basically says what Jim Semivan says. If you think you're going to measure this thing, forget it. This is something that's consciousness interdimensional. The portal thing goes to the consciousness thing. I say that the ground of being is consciousness, not the physical world. That was the download I had in 2012. It came with absolute certainty. And once I got that straight in my head, everything started to make sense. That basically this is going to be a lot less physical than people think it is. It's going to be a lot less ET than people think it is. It's very much interdimensional, where you have beings coming out of balls of light. So the question is, if a being comes out of a ball of light, is it a ball of light, or is it a being? Is it a flesh and blood being? And if it's a ball of light, does it eat bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? You got to realize that this thing may not actually be physical. It can come into the physical environment. It can become physical, but it's much more complex. So what's happening with the portal is the portal, and Ron actually went on camera. It's the only time I've ever seen him on camera. He said he's talking about this John guy, and I actually asked Dan Smith yesterday. I said, this John guy, he's a key guy. He's a ex-Marine guy who shows up in a lot of these videos. I said, have you talked to him? He's the portal guy. What have you said? He said, I've tried to waterboard the guy. I can't get him to say anything. And on this video on a ship, Ron Pandolfi says, everybody in this room wonders what it's like to go into another world. Soon, some of us in this room, when John goes back to the desert, and this is where the portal idea, it's in the desert. When he goes back to the desert, some of us will go with him, and we'll go into another world and come back into this world. And so this is this idea, and the way they describe it, they call it the wishing well. You can manifest on the other side. You need the beings on the other side to let you through, but it's like a dream world. And this is this whole idea that it's consciousness. This is how they come here. They come through portals. They don't have big ships that they're flying here. They're going like entangled particles in quantum physics from one point and another in space. They understand how this is all tied together. Like when they ask, Jan Hartson asked Lockheed Skunk Works director Ben Rich, Ben, how do they get here? How does it work? And he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And that's when Jan says, oh, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben Rich said, that's how it works. And that is how it works. That's why the portal thing is so important. So that is truly something, if they can get this out, the idea that this has got this interdimensional. And that's what I say the main cover-up to me is not the government. It's not the media. It's science, because science says it's a material world. It's nuts and bolts. We're random biological robots in a meaningless universe, and you can't get here from there because of the speed of light. You can't move matter. And the whole thing is matter is secondary. Consciousness is first. That's how they're moving through time and space. And when this thing is released, I say the scientific world is going to take the biggest hit, because they're going to realize almost everything that they believed was wrong. They believed in this material world, this randomness. None of that's going to be true. It's going to be this consciousness-based universe where you can move from one place to another, where there is no time, there is no space. It's all illusion. It's almost like a dream. And that's what the portal talks about, is it's almost like going into a dream when you get through onto the other side, and you can actually manifest stuff. You can change stuff. And so I think that's a very important thing. And that's one of the teams. The other team Chris indicated, I don't know if it's right, is the Stephen Greer thing. That Stephen Greer is being fed. I don't care what anybody says. You get 540 witnesses. The way they stop you is they don't kill you. Stephen always talks about, they're trying to kill him and stuff. No, that's not how they do it. They don't kill you. What they do is if you get a bunch of sources, say, Erica, you get a bunch of sources, what they'll do is they'll send you a couple of other sources who are going to tell you something that's completely contrary to what your sources are saying. And then your head starts to spin and you don't know what's going on. That's what they do. So if Stephen got close at some point to the truth, what they do is they inundate him with bad witnesses. So he doesn't really know what's going on. He's got 540 witnesses, and he's sort of indicating that they're all good witnesses. I can absolutely guarantee you there are some bad witnesses in there that are trying to mislead him or direct him or manage him to go down a certain road. And we even had the question that after he did the documentary Sirius, he had made a statement to someone, this close friend of mine who was in the theater, and said, oh, now I got to go back to Ron Pandolfi, the CIA Weird Desk, and report to him. So Ron has these go-to meetings that anybody that wants to attend these things, they don't really have them so much anymore, but Ron and his wife, who's got a master's degree, has a foundation, actually have these go-to meetings on the internet where they will take questions, and Ron's not so much on, he's not on camera, but she's on camera, and they take these questions about the portal and stuff like that. And anybody who wants it can contact me at whitehouseuFO@gmail.com. And I will I have a list of people that when there's a meeting, we say, okay, this meeting's on there. And it's during these meetings that they basically talk about the portal and talk very openly about this whole thing. And people don't realize they're doing this right out in the open. Whatever you want to think about the Pandolfis, they're doing this right out in the open. And one of the questions that we asked was that we'd heard the story about Stephen Greer. So we asked the question, does Stephen Greer vet his material through Ron Pandolfi? And all of a sudden you hear Ron in the background. He's in the room. He says, what stories? And then the guy from Gaia TV asked the question again. He said, is Stephen Greer getting help from Ron Pandolfi or putting his stories through Ron Pandolfi? There's dead silence for about 10 seconds. And then someone says, I think you just got the answer to your question. And that's the thing. I've got 24 people that Ron Pandolfi's dealt with. And he's helping people. He's working with people and stuff like that. But it's all this plausible deniability thing that people don't realize how much interaction there is, that they are in one hand helping people and the other hand managing people and throwing people off the track because they want people to talk about it. The same as the aliens are doing the same thing. If the aliens wanted to disclose, they'd land on the White House lawn. That's not what they're doing. They're doing the breadcrumb thing. They're doing the gradual disclosure. They're not covering up. They're not disclosing. They're doing exactly what the government's doing. The little breadcrumb. They give you this little hint. Oh, you have this little dream. It tells you this. You get a little message. You find a little triangle on your body, and they're playing. It's the same game. It's this gradual disclosure thing, which I think is a big part of what it has to. You can't do this overnight. You've got to do it gradually. And I think that's what this is all about.
So do you think, though, that we each have the ability to make a connection?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people are better than others, though. That's where this thing comes in with the story. The biggest story I've ever run up against, at the end of the show, I'll tell you this. The biggest story I've ever run up against is the Shasta story of the Zendras. When I got involved with this thing, I could not believe nobody had covered this story. It is unbelievable. And in there, they have the same thing. They have people that are able to open these Zendras, that are able to make the communication with these aliens, and then the alien will come down and they take 7 people into the Zendra. The one had 10 people in this Zendra, and they're looking at this alien, and I'm interviewing these people. Did you see the alien? Oh, yeah, I saw him. And they're telling this story, and each group has what's called an antenna. And it's a person who's able to do the automatic writing where they suddenly are getting messages exactly when these sightings are going to occur, where they're going to occur and stuff like that. And so that the antenna is an important thing, but it's the same as music or anything like that. People all have the ability, but it's like music. Some people are really good at it. Right. And that's where you get these channelers who are really good, and you can sort of validate them after a while where the message is pretty clear. It's picking up. The one I use is Chris Bledsoe. I say in terms of understanding what's going on, you listen to Chris Bledsoe. He's as honest as the day is long. He could not lie to save his life. And he's basically, and I know by the contacts that he's got that he's considered to be a very high-level antenna, and there are some in the contactee community who I believe are these antennas, but there's only very few people who can do this thing, who can make the connection, and that's why I say the experiencers are the most important people. I say forget about the sightings. You can learn a little bit by that, but if you get an experiencer, that's a person who's an antenna. They
Right.
are getting onto the other side. 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experiencer, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. 42% of experiencers are getting downloads. Why would you not talk to these people? They are, and they've got the password. They're their antenna. They're getting material from elsewhere. Watch them as closely as you can. That's my final answer.
Absolutely. And the key players are watching them, and they're taking this incredibly seriously. And I think that's the big takeaway. I think in ufology, quote unquote, whatever we want to call it, we make the mistake of we're still here trying to prove whether this is a reality. Well, we know it is. Let's get on with it, and let's look at the important things and move on and do something productive. But I would love to have you back on the show, because we haven't even talked about the musical connection and all of these other things that you have researched. And I thank you so much for being on. I knew this was going to be a great show.
Well, I appreciate your interest, and let's do it again sometime.
Oh, we will, absolutely. And I just want to tell everyone, please go to presidentialufo.com, learn more about Grant and his really groundbreaking, important work, and you can bet that he will be back on, and we will have more to update you with. But make sure you are discerning. Make sure you don't take any of this lightly. This isn't just a ploy to make money. So, keep me posted. Make sure you are tuning in to UFO Classified next week. Thank you so much for supporting me and for being here. Be safe and stick around for a great night of women on KCOR. I'll catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network. Broadcast